Okay, so let's talk about today. So hopefully, guys, you guys have some idea about how we create step definition, right? And hopefully you have some practice at home. Okay, so today we will talk about object-oriented programming concepts. And it's not specific to the Ruby. I mean, this is available in any programming language, whether you work on Java or C# or whatever programming language. But as part of this session, we'll talk about the OOP concept. And then we will go through some exercises, and then we'll enhance our project that we built yesterday. We'll build on top of it. How do we create the classes in the project to support the test automation side of things? Okay, so let's understand what is object-oriented programming and different things. Okay, so object-oriented programming is more of a paradigm or way of writing your programs. Paradigm is nothing but following certain principles. But it's essentially like you are writing we started with some basic programs, like writing in the procedure type of thing, where you are creating all the statements in one lump sum program. Then we started looking at the function, how we can reuse it. And now we are looking at the object-oriented programming, so that you can organize your code better. Okay, so this way of writing, or this paradigm, will allow your program to organize your code better. It increases the reusability and so forth. Okay, so that's the main thing. Now it follows certain principles: abstraction, polymorphism, encapsulation, inheritance, and so forth. We'll not take a look at it today, but we'll take a look at it next week. What it is and so forth. But I'm just going to cover what is abstraction, right? It's just a basic by definition. It's basically, abstraction is to abstract something. It's more like abstract view, right? So it's simplifying the complex reality by modeling the classes appropriate to your problem. Okay, so you create the abstraction, you apply this principle as soon as you create the class, and start organizing your code in certain way.
So it will simplify the
it simplifies the complexity and so forth. Complex reality. Now polymorphism, basically. Polymorphism is more like a process of using a function. You can provide different data inputs, and it will have a different behavior, basically. That's the polymorphism. So you write the function once, but based on the parameters you pass, you can put different logic in the function, so it will execute the code differently. That's what the polymorphism. So same function, but can do different things for you.
Okay, so different than.
So kind of like a square and rectangle, and let's say we have a square function. Now you are sending the type in square, and you are returning the calculate area for square. Now, if you are returning the type as triangle, and you have a calculation logic for triangle's area, then you can execute that as part of the same function, basically. So same function can do different things depending on how you program it. But that concept is called polymorphism. Okay, essentially. Now, encapsulation, you will it's a hiding something, right? So when you define a class, other programs that are using the logic that is defined within the class or objects, basically, they don't know what's written within the class definitions and so forth. So it's hiding the details about the actual logic. All they need to know, the calling program needs to know is how can I calculate my area, basically, and what function I need, what type I need to pass, and it will give me the actual area. They don't know, they don't care about how it's being calculated, how the program is written, and so forth. So it hides the implementation details of the class from the other objects or other programs. That's basically an encapsulation. It's more like a method, right? You are writing the method, but method has to be visible within the within your program. Then only you can use the method. Classes, you can create the libraries, right? There are gems in the Ruby. Generally, they are defined in the classes and they are distributed as libraries. We have no idea how the water library that we install is working, right? So we install a bunch of gems, right? First day, gem water, gem selenium. Do we have any details how they work? No, but
Oh,
we just simply use the objects and call their methods, and that's it. And it does the work for us. So that's the power of encap. It's just a concept, right? It's nothing to do with programming, but it's more of a concept that applies to the OOP, object-oriented programming. Okay. Now inheritance, this is a powerful one. This is the most advantage you can get. You can define a class and you can create the new classes based on that previous class. So you can enhance it, basically, functionality. Okay. But so the concept here is you can form new classes using the classes that you have already defined. So it's like inheriting something.
mhm.
So we are inheriting from our parents certain genes and so forth. That is basically inheritance, right? It's a same concept in the classes. You can create new classes based on the previously defined classes. Okay. And as part of the inheritance, you can reuse the methods that was already defined as part of the parent class and so forth. So we'll take a look at some inheritance concept today. And actually next week as well. Okay, these are 4 basic things. Any object-oriented, if you are writing the object-oriented programming, it will support these 4 basic things. Okay. All right, so let's see what is objects, right? So any programming language, Ruby is object-oriented programming, so it basically supports OOP in the fundamentals. It's a building block for Ruby. Any data type that you see in Ruby, it's object-oriented programming. Like arrays, they are objects, hashes, they are objects, strings, they are objects, and so forth. But what essentially object is, it's a combination of data and methods in simplest term. Okay. So if we define a car object in our program, right? So data would be what is the color of the car, how many number of wheels it has, how many number of doors it has, right? Now so those are kind of like a data, you can say, or properties of an object. Now car does have methods. So can you drive a car? Can I drive a car? How much speed it can do, basically, and so forth. So object will always contain data and methods. Okay, data and methods. So just remember that for now, and when we take a look at the example, we can come back to this item. So object is nothing but data and methods. So data represents, those are considered properties, and methods are something that you can do with the object, some action you can take with the objects. Okay, that's the simplest concept on that. Now, objects has 2 things. Okay, what is really object and how do we create it, right? So first we have to define a class as part of the object. In order to use the object in programmatic way, we have to define a class, basically. And class is class. It's called class in all the programming languages. Okay, not just Ruby. Now, what is class? It's more like a template. So you have to define what the object is supposed to do, basically. What data it needs, what are the methods it will contain, you have to define as a programmer or automation developer and so forth. So you define a template, and then when you use it in your programming, basically, it becomes you create an instance of a basically class, which is called really the object, basically. Okay, so first thing, the definition, you will need a definition for an object, which is called class. And then when you use the programmatic way, and when you instantiate an object or create an object, that's where you are basically saying you are creating a new object, basically, or creating a new instance of a class. So you define it and then create an instance. Those are the two things that you have to do.
One more time.
So you have to define just like a function you are defining, you have to define it, right? So that's where you have to define a class, and that is called a template. What method goes in, what is supposed to do. So it's a programmatic way. So this is called a template or blueprint, more like a blueprint, right? So you are designing a car. So first you draw it on piece of paper, then you actually implement a car, which are different types of cars, right? But cars will have 4 wheels, and it can drive. All the cars will drive, but you have to write it on piece of paper, right? First, and then when you start actually creating the new car, those are kind of like instance of a car. Same concept here. You define the class in the program, and then when you start using in the programming, call from different things or programs, that's where you are creating the instance of a class or instance, basically, or objects, basically, at that point. So object terminology, you have a class, which is a template or definition. And second one is you can start using in the program that is called instance of a class. Okay. So those two things.
So that means what you said, abstraction, here it is like that.
Yeah, so we are creating abstract, right? Simplifying. Now, designing the object is that's where you apply some practical knowledge. How do you define the classes? How do you organize your code? That comes with a little bit experience, right? But you're gonna learn the technique. How do we go about in the test automation? What objects what classes we need to define and so forth from our standpoint. But programmers, they will look at the actual data models and so forth, and then come up with the classes. Define the class and then use it in the program. So this is the simple way of creating a class. It says class learning, right here. Class learning, and then you have end, right? This particular code block.
So L should be capital.
Yes, so that needs to be capital, right? Now that is the simplest way. Now this is an empty class. It just doesn't have anything. It's just a shell structure right now.
So you can write only class.
Yeah.
That is correct. That's a keyword. It's kind of like a def function name, right?
Yeah,
This is the keyword for defining a class.
class and end.
End has to be there, right? It's a code block,
Yeah.
right? So every method that you write it as an end, the same way class ends with the end. End. Okay. Now this is empty class, so it doesn't have anything, but let's take a look at the one. Before we take a look at it now, so we define the class. Now, how do we initialize or how do we use it in programming mode, right? So that's where you have learning.new. So we create a new instance of a learning. How do you create new instance, right? That's what we are talking about. This learning.new, this is the way, it's kind of like an array.new, which we already saw that, right? Because all the objects you can create by calling .new. So this is the way you can create a new instance of a class. Now, is there a?
So far, we have not initialized means for the normal Ruby coding.
Mhm.
We have never initialized any variable, right?
Um,
The class
Yeah,
is
just
different.
array, we looked at the example, but we never really actually implemented anything because you guys don't know object-oriented programming. How do you initialize the classes and so forth, create an instance, right? So, yeah, we have not done that. But you define the class, but how do you use it in program? First, you need to initialize it. And that will create an instance. This is how you can create an instance. And then that instance basically, instance is nothing but a copy of a class in the memory, basically, when you are running the program. That's all the instance is. And then you can, how many instances you can create? Can I just create only one, 2, 3? It's up to you. You can create millions of instances of the class. Basically, or basically million instance or objects basically from the one definition. Okay, there is no limit on that. It depends on how
Because
you,
you are making the copies, that's.
it's a copy. It's a copy, all the methods that are there, all the data that you have defined, it will be basically part of that instance. Now, if you change, let's say here, we are creating learning.new,
Mhm.
A equals learning.new, right? This is what we are doing here, A equals learning.new. Now, if I change something in that class, will it affect anybody else? It will not. So let's say we have two instances, B equals learning.new and A equals learning.new. Now we have two instances in this case. Now, if I change something in A instance, it's not going to affect the B class because it's a copy.
Mhm.
It treats as a completely different, okay? So it's not gonna do anything with the B. B is a new instance, new object. It has its own memory and own data and
So
other things.
initially both will be same.
Both will be same. Yeah, because when you initialize, yes, you are, unless you are initializing differently.
Different.
There are ways you can initialize it, but otherwise it will be exactly same carbon copy. Okay. Now, what happens when we say learning.new? Right? So what it does is when you have a learning.new here, right? So what it does, it's called a specialized method called constructor. When you do that, learning.new, it calls a constructor method. Now, in our class, we don't have any method or anything defined, right? Learning, class learning, nothing is there. So our method does not have any logic, basically. Okay. So even though you have not defined anything, basically, it will call basically class without any logic, initialize it without any logic. Okay, but you can constructor is you can override the constructor. Override is means you can define your own constructors in the class. What I mean by that, in this one example, take a look at it. This class learning example here, you have def initialize. Def initialize is a constructor method in the class. Okay, so what happens is if I call learning.new, then it will call this def initialize, and whatever logic here is getting, it will execute basically at that point.
Actually, what it will do, the def initialize statement.
It's every class will have a constructor method. All the classes, whether you define it or doesn't define. If you don't define, programmatically, it will not do anything. It will be created automatically, which is empty methods, will not do anything else.
Then it is needed, right?
It depends on what you are trying to do. That's where your class design comes into play. So let me see if I can take a look at here. Right, so we are creating a class learning, and this is end. Now, and if I need to call this class, so let's take a look at it here.
A equals to.
Okay, so A equals learning,
Learning.new.
learning.new. This is how we can initialize, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if I, right now, when I do that, now this class does not have initialize method, right? There is no constructor. By default, there is nothing here, right? We have not defined it on our endpoint. So what
this statement will do?
Then it
What
will,
return?
it will not, so this statement, so by default, there is an empty initialize method, which we don't see, okay?
So this is by default.
By default,
By default.
all the classes will have,
Okay.
okay? But what you can do is, since you have not put any logic here, you have not defined any method, the program compiler will automatically assign initialize method, empty initialize method. Okay,
So is
It will
better
always
to
be there.
initializing the variables?
no, initializing the class. Initializing the class. So class is also very, this is a class, right? This is .new method. We are calling, but there is nothing there. But when you, as soon as you call this, the class will be compiled, right? Because it has to be compiled, right? Yeah, but so if the program, the compiler does not see that method, then it will automatically have a by default blank or empty initialize method created. It will not do anything else. Okay, so it will by default will get some empty initialize method, which doesn't have any logic. Okay, but what I'm trying to say is, if you want to do something, you can define your own method, initialize, and then say here puts test. So what it will do, when you write it in the template, essentially you are writing your own initialize method. So when you run this program, compiler will see, there is already have initialize method, so I don't have to do anything. So I'm gonna go and execute the logic here. So it will print out test.
So
At the
that
point.
initialize is the keyword here,
Yes, initialize is a reserved word.
so.
In
you
the
cannot start with the capital letter or?
No, it everything has, remember all the methods, you cannot start with the capital letter in the Ruby. All the methods. Okay, you cannot put I initialize like that. It has to be initialized, exactly spelled out, because it's a reserved keyword in the Ruby programming. Okay, so if I come here, let me write in the demo session. Not the demo, let me open the Ruby. Cucumber. Go to the Hello Ruby. Okay. So let me go and define a class. Demo class. RB. Okay, so now I'm putting my Ruby code and I'm going to define.
class.
Okay. Let me get rid of this guy. I'm going to work with my project here, Cucumber exercises. Okay. Okay, so how do I define a class? Class learning, right? So, and this is my empty class, right? And if I, let's say A is equal learning dot new. As soon as you do that, right? Learning, it will automatically put it in green, right? Or the whatever purple color, because it's it recognizes, okay, there is a definition here. So now I'm going to use that. Now I can use it, I can execute my program. And it will be fine. Okay, there is no error, but it doesn't do anything right now because we have not put any logic anywhere. So now what we are talking about is initialize, because it still calls the initialize, okay, because compiler puts empty. Now let's say I want to do something. So I'm going to put initialize method, and let's say we just prints out hello class, something like that. So when I call this same line, now I'm expecting to see hello class. Okay, because that is what it will be executed at that point. So now it will print out hello class. This is a definition, this is the template.
Mhm.
Okay, so you have to define template first, then only you can call whatever you need to do within the class. It's the same concept, any programming language, if you have worked with. If you have not, it's a new concept, but then again, this is what you can apply to anywhere else. Okay. Now, the good thing about initialize. So you can send, it's a Ruby method, right? It's a Ruby function method. But all the Ruby method return something, right? We know that all the Ruby methods return something.
Pass something to something.
But this is a specialized Ruby method that does not return anything.
Class,
This initialize does not return any value from the, because it's a reserved method in the Ruby. So it will not return anything else. All you can do is put some logic to do something when you want to initialize a class, but it will not return any value out of it.
value means true, false, or any value.
Any value, right? So if I say return X,
It will not.
it will not do anything. Okay, it might throw an error. Let's see here. Right, it says you cannot, well, it says undefined variable X is equal test. It may or may not throw an error, but let's see, it will not return any value. Okay, see, it does not do anything here.
Correct.
That's just because it's a specialized method, it's only used for initialization purpose for the class. Now, what is initialization? So let's say we want to, when we initialize the class, we want to send some data in. So I can have the arguments or parameters here. Let's say X and Y. Okay, so when I said learning.new, now it doesn't. So here it's showing me red line. Okay, it's showing me red line here. Can you guys see it?
Mhm.
Right? Why? Because my initialize method accepts two parameters.
Oh,
Okay, so
Within bracket, maybe we have to specify.
yeah, so now I have to send in those X and Y values, so I can say test1 and test2.
Test.
So these values will go back to the class initialize method, and I can do anything with that. So as soon as I initialize, my values are passed to the class, and I can do maybe later on any programming I want to do.
So it is just like passing the parameter.
Passing the
but
parameter.
Doesn't return any value.
Doesn't return any value, but you can do something. So now if I say puts X, puts Y, okay, so these values are now within the class, and I can use that in any other logic.
We can use it
Yes, you can use it
outside the class.
outside the class. It depends on, again, you have to program how you want to use it and so forth. But right now, if you want to pass something to the class, you can do it in the initialization, or you can do it in the properties and methods. You can set those.
No, if it doesn't return any value.
Uh-huh.
Inside the class, the value will be test1, test2.
Yes, inside the class,
Yeah.
it will be test1, test2.
After coming out of that class,
Uh-huh.
what will be the value?
It will be there. The values are stored.
Can we put X and Y after A?
No, it's not here. Because it's, remember, it's within the class. So I need to have used that value within the logic of the class here somewhere. So here, we will take a look at how we can use those initialized parameters and so forth. We will talk next, basically.
So that's what you are telling, you have to use inside the class only.
Inside the class, they are this variable, these values are available inside the class only. Within the class logic,
it's
you can
returning-
use it.
Not returning.
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah, that is correct. Okay, not to confuse too much. So, but just remember for now, it's a initialize. And how do you initialize a class? Learning.new. This is how, or any class that you create, you will be creating like that. If you need to pass in parameter, you can definitely send it. You can, by default, it does not take any parameter. So, but you can always create your own parameters in the initialize and pass that through in the class. And this values, you can use it later on in the other programming. Okay. So for now, that's all I wanted to talk. Okay. All right, so in this example, right, this class initialize method is a standard Ruby class method. Initial method is useful when you want to initialize some class variables at the time of object creation, because that's the only time you can use it. And you can specialize something. Now we'll talk about what these are, at name and at age and all those things. Now, going back to our example here, right? So we are sending N and A. Now there is a concept called instance variable. Okay, instance variable. So instance variables are kind of class attributes and they become the properties of the object. So class will have data or properties, right? Properties meaning color, like we talked about, a car has a color, car has number of doors, 2 doors, and so forth. So this is the way you can define the properties, which are called instance variables in the Ruby programming. In other languages, they are called properties, like Java, you call object properties, which are nothing but instance variables. And properties are nothing but some way of defining the variables. Anyway. So instance variable are kind of class attributes and they become properties of the object once the objects are created using the class, right? Every object attribute are assigned individually and share no value with other objects. So as we said, right, initially you can have instance A, instance B, instance C created, and everybody has their own properties and methods and data, basically. So instance variables you cannot share between the classes. So what I mean by that is, let's come back to our example. So I can show you here. Okay. So now in this example, so now we are talking about here, how do we use those values, right? So I can have at where var1.
We can see.
Oh, okay. Give me a second. Oh, when I go in the presentation mode, it doesn't display the other screen. Okay. Okay. Okay, gotcha. All right. So now what I can do is I pass these variables and I can assign to instance variable called variable1 or whatever name you want to give. Okay. So I can say X here at var2 is equal Y. Okay, something like that. So I'm storing now these are local variables.
At var1.
Yes, at var1 and at var2, or let's just simply say at B, whatever, or A. Right?
It's just a variable.
It's just a name, right? Okay, at A is equal X and at B is equal Y. So whatever test1, when you do that, when I call learning.new with these two values, they will flow here into X and Y, and then X value will be assigned to this instance variable. Okay, so this guy will have the copy of at X will contain X and Y, right? Now let's say I do B learning.new and I say test3 and test4. Okay, so if I do this, B now for B instance will contain a copy of test3 and test4 into this at A and at B. Okay, so this is a copy. B is a second instance. It has its own data, its own copy. A is its own data and own copy. Now, let me just write a simple method here.
Always return arbitrate.
Yes, always you have to define the class variable as an at. Okay, with that's the difference, right? So we talked about different types of variables. So X and Y are local variables. At A is a class variable or instance variable,
Yeah.
not the class, it's an instance variable, right? These are instance variable available for that instance. Okay, now let's say I have defining another method called print values. You can, now so kind of like a car has a drive, that's a method you can define. So I'm defining a method in the class called print values. Okay, and what I'm going to do, puts at A, puts at B. Okay, so I can use the instance variable anywhere in the class. I cannot use this X and Y anywhere in the class because these are local to this method. It's a local variable. Okay, available only within initialized method, X and Y. But as soon as I store it into instance variable are accessible anywhere within the class template.
Oh, that's why.
That's why you-
Create the copy of it so
Yep,
that you
yep.
can use it.
We can reuse it anywhere in the other method that class has. Class might have 50 methods, depending on what you are trying to do. But here in this class, I have two methods now. One is initialize and one is print values.
Yeah.
This one is my default reserve method. This is my custom method. I want to do something. Now, how do I call this method? So I can simply call it A dot print values. Okay, this is how you can call it in object-oriented programming. If I want to call instance method, basically, I can simply say A dot print values and I will say B dot print values. Okay, because I have two objects, right? Two instances. So those both are available. I can call the method separately. Now, what would be the output of A dot print values? What would be the output?
Test one, test two.
Right? Test 1 and test 2.
Yeah.
And B will have output of test 3 and test 4 because it's its own copy.
Yes.
All right. So that's what it is. So let's run it and see if that's true. So right, first one, I'm printing out what it's going through A and it's printing two things, puts A and put B, right? So this is test 1 and test 2. Then test 3 and test 4 will be printed for puts B, basically B dot print value. Okay, but this is the way you can call the instance methods or class methods. Okay, let's come back here. Now let's take a look at it.
Can you show the program one more time?
Okay. So this is class, right? And then I have two simple program. My program is simple, create two instances of the class and then print out the values. Okay. I'll let you guys work through some exercise a little bit later. Okay. But I just have to understand the concept and we'll spend some time on working through this. Remember, you are automation tester, right? So you're not going to be doing heavy coding, but you need to learn how do you create the classes, how do you organize your code, and how do we create the method and call the methods. Now, generally for steps that you will have, so you will typically, what you will typically do is for every page, let's say we are on the login page, we are writing the scenario login. So you will typically create a class for the login page. It could be called login class. Then you will have whatever action you are taking, you will be creating the method for that. So you might have a login class, might have a login method, maybe visit page method as well. So you need to go to the login page and then visit. So you might define as a visit page method. Second thing you might do is a login method for that. And then you can put additional logic to actually perform those actions. How do I go visit the page? When we talk about the water WebDriver or Selenium, we will fill that out. Additional parts. But every page, so you go to the, so that login class will have one, it will be for login page. Then you go on the home page, you might have a second class. When you go to the calculator page, you might have third class. Any action you are doing, you will be creating the methods for it. That's the whole idea.
And one more question, while defining the methods. You give some certain names, right, like print values.
Yeah, whatever.
or, some calcs and.
Right.
In that you are starting with the small letters, but in between there is capital letter. Is it mandatory or you can write down with, like here? Print values.
Yep.
Is in capital, so we have to follow that or we can just.
Print values.
Yesterday.
Or
we
you
had
can do all
examples. That's a test calc, so C was capital, so is it like, we have to also follow that or only?
No,
small
all the
case?
methods are lowercase.
Lowercase, right?
All the starts with the lowercase, but you can follow the camel case afterwards. So
Okay. So
with the
there
name, that one is fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is fine.
Okay.
But
That is
everything
okay.
has to start with the lowercase. Class is uppercase.
Yeah.
Okay, class is uppercase, kind of like in this example. So this is another example of the instance method, right? So this is there
Means
is a
you mean to
different,
say class starts with the uppercase letter.
yes, by definition. So here class len, this one is a uppercase, but everything else, all the methods you will see is a lowercase. Okay. So instance methods, right? We already talked about it, but here let's take a look at this example. So how many instance methods we have in this example?
Two. Oh,
Instance method,
One.
one, right?
One.
Initialize is a constructor.
Mm.
It's a specialized method, it's not an instance method. Okay, so here, now, what we are trying to do is, we have initialize, it takes two parameters,
Mhm.
L and W. And I'm storing that into two instance variable called length and width, at length, at width. Now, in the get area, I'm just simply returning the multiplication. Now, all other methods are returns a value, right? Everything else except initialize will return a value. So this value will be written from there because this is the last statement, even though it does not have a return statement. So at L multiply at width will be written to the caller. So my definition ends here.
Return to where?
Wherever I'm calling this method, the value will be, this multiplication will be written to the
But we
method
can write L
as a
and,
method result.
we can write L and W, right? Because we already.
No, L and W's are not available outside this initialize method. Remember, this is local variable,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Got it.
This is local variable,
Yes.
right? So
We're
you
making a
can,
copy of it so that you can use it
Yeah.
outside the.
yep, outside. So
Yeah.
this at length, these are instance variable, they are available anywhere in the class definition.
Mhm.
Okay, so now here I'm doing land info equals, so instead of AB, I'm doing the land info object instance by calling land.new and I'm sending 10 and 20. This method .new and because initialize takes two arguments. Right, so I'm sending 10 and 20 as an argument. And when I do land area equals land info dot get area. I think this one is
So why is it in land? Because of that area, right?
which
Oh,
one?
This is a, okay.
This is land info, this is land area, right? So this is just a variable. Land area equals land info dot get area. So now I'm calling this instance method get area. So what would be the output? What will be the value stored in the land area?
10 and 20.
10 and
So
20.
what would be stored here? Land area.
Land area, 10 into 20.
10 into 20.
10 into 20, right? 200. In our example, it will be 200,
Yeah.
right? So that's what this will contain, basically value. And this is how we can call it, dot get area, whatever the method name is.
Oh, okay. So land info dot get area.
Yeah. You have to say dot object-oriented programming. It's you can call the method same way in any programming language. Python, Java, C#, doesn't matter. Ruby works the same way.
Now wait.
Um,
Write down again, you'll flip the page and we'll forget.
no, I'll let you work through, at least a couple of exercises, we create the class, I'll let you work through. Don't worry, I'll let you work through, okay? We'll spend some time on this one.
That time, this one will not be there.
No, I-
No, this one is with you. It's already there. It's online.
It's,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, this is there?
yeah,
Yeah, I
everything is
looked-
there,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
yeah, everything is there.
Yeah.
Alright, so. This is the basics about class, right? So initialize instance variable, instance methods, right? And so forth. This is how we can start organizing certain things. How do we call the method? How do we initialize it and so forth? Okay, so. Let's come back so to the variables, right? So we talked about there are different types of variable. So local variable, you guys understand, right? What is local variable? It begins with a lowercase letter, right? So in this example, so local variables are with the lowercase. That's all I'm trying to say here. Okay, so on the class, these two classes and so forth. Now, the main thing, local variables are not available outside the method because they are local variables. Okay. Now we looked at the instance variable. Instance variable are available across the method for any particular instance or an object. But you cannot share them between the classes. It's available only for that instance variable. And instance variables are preceded by the @ sign and the symbol, right? So here, I have in this particular class, I have 3 instance variables, right? And I have one method called display details. And when I do customer1 equals this, customer2.new, customer.new, send these values. And when I call these methods, what should be the output? So customer is the object, right? We have class customer,
Yeah,
is
John Wisdom Apartment, you are.
right? So customer1.display will print out again this one. Customer2.display will print out this one. That will print out 2 Paul, New Empire Road, New York. Okay, so that's the output here. Okay. Now, there's one more type of variable. I think we talked earlier. There's a dollar with the dollar, right? Global variables, which is called global variable. So anything that you define with a dollar symbol, it is a global variable. It's a single variable to be available across classes. Okay, it's a global variable. Okay, anywhere, not just classes, any program that you have in your project, the variable will be available. Now, assignment to global variable alters global settings, but it is not recommended to use global variables. Because you don't know what program will change what value, and it defeats the whole purpose. Okay, so it's not recommended to use global variables in your programs unless you really need it. Okay. So here, for global variable example, I have. So I have one global variable, dollar global variable equals 10, right? Then I'm changing the value or printing the value, puts global variable in class is global variable. In one class, I have this global variable value equals. So I can call that from anywhere. Essentially, what this example shows is I can use this global variable from any instance or any class anywhere in my project. Okay, this global variable is 10. I can override the value of go in this logic if I need to. Okay, but as I said, it's not recommended to use global variable.
So it's not local, so that's why you can use everywhere.
You can use it everywhere. It's a dollar symbol, so it's available in any program that you have within your project.
And it's not recommended.
It's not recommended, so All right, so now there is a one last variable. And we will not talk much, go in detail, but it is available. So class variables are available across different objects. Okay, so there is another type called class variable. So we talked about instance variable, which is a copy within the class. Now class variable is available across all the copies of that particular object. Okay,
Not local.
it's not local, it's not instance. It's a variable that is available across all copies of that object. So if I say A is equal learning.new and B is equal learning.new, that variable will be available within in both copies, A and B. Okay,
So then what is the difference between both instance and class?
see, instance variable is you cannot use it outside the class.
You are defining the instance within the class.
Within the class. So
Oh, okay.
add symbols, yeah.
Class is the structure.
Yeah,
Within that, you are defining the instance.
but this one you can use outside the class.
Outside meaning in another class. It's
Another
available in the A and B both, so I can change the value of this at in both copies. So it's available across the copies, basically. That's the reason I'm saying we don't practically use it, but it is there. That's why I don't have even have an example here,
So
because I don't want to confuse you much.
that means you can use it in another class.
No, in the same,
No.
it's a copy. When you say .new, but in the logic, you can use the same variable. At it. Don't get it confused. I know that I don't have example here for you
Oh,
because I don't want you to make you confused, but it is available just in case somebody asks you what is at symbol.
oh, okay.
You will practically never use it. Now, if you are programming, writing the multi-threaded programs, that's where you will use this type of advanced level.
But it's better to know about it.
Yes.
This page, that variables and all. which
Page
slide
number-
it is there.
It's a slide, session 5
Some-
and page number, wait. I'll tell you.
Now the slides are updated. Okay, I updated the certain slides, this specifically this one.
But so far I have everything up.
Yeah. You should have it, but there are certain things
So this
that
is
was.
page number
No, I
14.
don't find.
No, you have it.
4.4 is there, then.
No, 5 is there. 5 is there. It's called Ruby variables and classes methods.
Yeah, it is there.
Oops, OOPS.
She might be looking at
Wait,
different place.
Look at here.
Hmm.
Oh.
That-
It has Cocoa books.
This is missing, that's why.
Maybe you can download.
It is in that Google folder only, Google Drive only, right?
Yeah.
So if I download that one means everything will be there. So that's why I'm not able to see, I'm missing this one.
Okay. All right, give me a second. Let's see what you are.
Maybe I can send it. Okay?
No, it should be there. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not able to see, that's what I'm
Can you go back?
just wondering.
Can you go back? there? You want it down?
Yeah. So I cannot see 1, 2, 3, see, my drive,
Yeah.
which drive?
okay, I need to see where I put that in.
Means in the very first class you asked us to download something, I think it was
No,
there.
I downloaded it yesterday though.
Ah.
Because I don't download everything together. Whatever we are learning, I usually do that and go
So
through
where
it.
is it?
In the email.
First,
Okay, so let's see here, where did I put it? You guys share from different place here.
So if you go to the email, you will find, wait.
So you will see Ruby classes methods updated.
I think it's a 11th, 11 November 13th email. You can go over there.
which one you said, Ruby classes?
Yeah, this is,
No, I don't have this one.
Yeah, it's there. It's number 5.
Yeah, maybe I didn't download.
Yeah, you didn't download, so just download it. It's there. Okay,
Okay.
it is there.
It's there in that drive.
Yep.
Actually.
Okay. All right, so let's come back. Okay, so we are talking about the class variables, right? So is everybody clear on the difference between global versus local versus instance? Those are the important one.
Yeah,
Fourth one is class variable. If
little
you-
bit complicated, but I got it, the class variable.
That's good. Practically, you will not have any usage in the test automation. Okay, so we
So
are.
basically, you can use it within the class, also outside.
It's a shared data values between the copies of the class,
Okay.
okay, or instances. That's the way you can think it. Okay. Now the naming convention. Let me just briefly talk about the naming convention. For different things. I think you guys already know it, but I just want to put it here quickly. So local variables does not have anything, right? Instance variables starts with the @ right? Instance methods should be start with the lowercase and maybe followed by digits underscore whatever,
So
Right.
here are the details, okay.
right? Class variable again starts with an @ sign. Okay, so and the constant is uppercase later. Okay, so everything else is lowercase except constant. Constant it starts with the uppercase. And what to. So I just summarize here for just in case if you need it to refer back. Now classes. Class name starts with the uppercase, right? Module, there is one more concept called module, we'll talk next week. As well, it's a little bit different, more like libraries type of thing, but let's talk about class. They both start with uppercase. By convention, they are named using mixed case. So land, if you have long name, you can use whatever uppercase and so forth, like mixed case. Kind of. And finally, the global variable starts with a dollar. So this is, you wanna keep it handy. It's all summary of what you, because I know a lot of people will struggle. How to name it and why my program is not recognized. Because you don't have proper naming convention. Ruby actually is not forgiving. If you name it L lowercase, then it will throw you an error. It doesn't recognize. Then you will say, oh, what happened to my program? Okay, so, we also talked about the methods, right? Class methods. Class methods, basically, same thing we talked last week. All different combinations are available in the class methods. All the methods returns a value, right? All the methods, so there is nothing new there. Again, definition, same way, def and n, that's how you can define your methods. And so forth. And it also have parameters, you can have default values, all those things that we talked last week, right? So I'm not gonna go into detail here because we already discussed last week. So this is the basically default value, you can read upon it. And now we can do some exercise.
Within 1 hour, I have lots of things in my mind right now.
So exercise meaning, what exercise we want to do is, so I like you guys to do is, but work through this, not this one, but let's come back, this one, learn exercise. Let's run through one, create a basic class, call the methods if you are able to work through it. So it's a Ruby program, right? It's a Ruby, so create .rb file. It's a .rb file.
So we have to go to Ruby and do the .rb.
Couple of things you can do. You can just create a .rb file in your current programming folder.
The Cucumber.
Yeah,
one?
Cucumber, yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, just create it over there. Yeah, it should be okay. You don't have to open different project.
Okay.
Now, after you are done with
The
it,
same programming, project only we can do, right?
yeah, you can do it. So in the Ruby, where do you write the code, right? In that file. So let me just show you one way quickly. Come on. Okay. So in your project, if you are to create any custom classes or anything, right?
Hmm.
Where do you create it? So I'll go back to
In the Ruby,
our
the project.
folder here,
Hmm.
right? This particular diagram. So yesterday we talked about the step definition and regex.
Right.
Now we are talking about creating the page objects and more Ruby code. This is where we are.
Mhm.
Okay, and for that we are learning the basic object-oriented programming concepts. Okay, and then we'll work through how do we organize the code and how do we create the page objects.
Mhm.
Okay, so this is where we are now. In order to do that, there is a. So I'll go back to this particular slide here. I think it's below. So we create a features directory. We know step definitions directory, right?
Mhm.
Now support directory. Most code files supporting Cucumber test will be created here. So any custom programs, any classes you create, they all will go into supports directory. Okay, supports directory or support directory. So what I can do is I can create a features, right click on it, new directory,
Mhm.
and I'll just name it as support.
Okay.
This is empty folder.
We'll create under Cucumber.
Under features.
Please one more.
Under features.
Under features,
Yeah, new,
new directory,
then support.
just type it in support. And you create your class.
Just support.
Yeah, just support,
Just support,
support.
then-
Okay,
then
and
create
your
a
class will be, and you can right click on the support folder, say new file. And just say whatever class you are creating, so learning. Learning class.rb. Doesn't matter whatever class that you want to create.
The support file should be after stated.
No, support is a folder.
Okay, support folder.
Support is a under features. Everything is under features.
Under features.
Okay, so make sure your folder structure is right. Okay, so you have support here, and then I have my demo class there. So make sure your folder structure is good.
And inside the support, we can give any name.
Yeah, you can give whatever, so they give the name, whatever you're working on right now. So this is the land. So if you have to create something, I would create as a land class. Class.rb. And then, so I just created a land class.rb, right? And or typical naming is let me refactor. Go with land class.rb, right? This is the file we have, and then you can type in your code. Now, first you need to have a definition. Okay,
Hmm.
and then you have your program. Gotcha? Does it make sense? Okay. Let's work through it then. So this is the template.
Does
And then-
copy paste work here?
What?
Does copy paste work here or we have to write down one by one?
It's up to you. Try it. I'm not sure if copy paste will work, but see if it works.
Next year is not.
But I would suggest create one from scratch so that you understand. If you do copy paste, then you probably will be in the same boat when you go home.
So this .rb file should come under support.
Yes, everything needs to be,
Support comes under feature.
yes. Mhm. Yep. All right, so I'll give you guys the 15 minutes. Okay, so because we have other things to work through
Okay.
No, we have to write down the code and
and run it.
run it.
Yeah,
And
and
only we will get the error right.
So
Yeah.
how about don't no copy paste, just write it.
Copy paste will not work. Maybe,
Okay.
maybe, I'm not sure.
No, typing is better choice.
I think
Know
you
what
go
you're
with the
writing.
typing.
You know what you're writing.
Yes.
Yes. And just add a put statement at the end because this one will not print anything, right? So just put the put statement or just say puts. Well, you can't do it puts here. So at the end in the program. So your program should look something like,
So we are just calculating,
The area of.
Area?
yeah, that's all.
So how to start it? Should I put some name or something? How to start?
This is where you're starting. Your definition is here, class definition, that's the first thing. You have to define class template. And then you can call the program class. Or create an instance of an object and call the method and then print it out. This is the standard way.